So there are two forces that we are trying to gain control over when it comes to juggling. And a lot of this is reflected in our strength and our ability to be able to have the capacity to efficiently bear load through these two types of forces and the movements that they imply. So first one, when you're catching a kettlebell and that weight is coming downwards, there's your ability to keep integrity, stay strong, and manage the pull of that weight coming down. So a lot of that is learning how to stay well connected to the lat and the oblique, and making sure there's not a disconnection from your shoulder and your arm from the rest of your body. So we want to stay nice and connected. That's why we go through all of the WEC method coiling core, to make sure that whole chain is well connected and working as a unit. So there's a downwards momentum. This is also why we want our posture to be nice and integral. And so if our hips is anywhere but tucked up, so tucked down, now my back is exposed, my glutes aren't able to fire as well, and it ends up giving you a really good tug on the back. And so by making sure we have good posture, glutes on, core connected, and how I like to do mills, leaning over to one side, so we're ready to receive that weight and work with it, instead of being symmetrical and just having to deal with that torque in the mid back. And so there's that compressive force going downwards. There is the ability to stay grounded as the bell reaches this point here where it is the heaviest. The next type of force is the acceleration. So the shifting from that downwards pull upwards with enough power to get the height that we need in order to get the amount of flips that we require. And so if I'm doing one flip, I'm not gonna need to shift gears and head up with as much power, because I'm only looking to maybe get this much height. But if suddenly I need 4 flips or 3 to catch, I'm shifting rapidly, making sure that I recycle that power and I don't lose any to get the height I need for 4 flips, for example. So things that are important here is, again, posture. So if I'm in this position right here, I'm tilted, okay? So I'm well braced for this movement, this decompressive force here, nice and connected. What happens next for the acceleration, shifting the pathway upwards, is some rotation. It's a lot easier to throw a bell lateral or straight as we rotate, because now I can draw a clear line backwards to keep that bell flying straight. If I don't rotate, what happens is it gets much more difficult to get that lateral throw. So we end up usually coming out in front, releasing slightly behind us, catching back here, which throws everything off. And so for that acceleration, moving upwards, I'm connected, I'm engaged, and I've got that rotation started. My chest and my hips are starting to move over to the side, even just slightly. What I find here is really important is the strength of your glute and your ability to stay connected to your core. Because if your core gives out, what happens is we get this really big compressive force on our lower back, and that's a pain that a lot of people get when starting classical juggling. And you can always tell who's not either connected to their core or doesn't have a strong enough core for classical juggling by watching how people arc or how they remain nice and strong and upright. Meaning my weight, my connection, my spine is laying at least perpendicular over my pelvis, as opposed to arching away like that. So things to pay attention to. Make sure the glutes are activated before we get into classical juggling. And so, not only my glutes, but my core are both connected to and working together with my pelvis. And so, again, if I'm like this, it's hard to engage my glutes, hard to engage my core. My pelvis is out of whack. If I tilt up, I can engage my glutes. I'm thinking about compressing my core to the degree that we need for the intensity of a certain throw. And I'm keeping this posture strong through my movement. And so I'm not pulled out of position. You see? Disconnected, disconnected, back takes over, it hurts. Trust me, I've had quite a bit of back pain throughout juggling, figuring this stuff out and pushing my limits to questionable degrees. So we have these two forces. Decompressive force, or this downwards force coming down, reaching the heaviest point right here, and then we are redirecting upwards, keeping in integrity until that bell rises past here, and then it enters more of a flow point where we can focus on the intentional release. And so those two together, and understanding that there are these two different factors that go into every classical mill. Again, mill thrown in this circular trajectory, whether that's an over the back or an over the shoulder, or a mill on 90, or a mill on 270. We're always dealing with force coming down, managing that, and then learning how to recycle that and stay grounded as we redirect it where we need the bell to go. Now, drills that can really help with being able to build capacity to navigate these forces better, I'm going to give you two, and these are all you need because they reflect the exact movement pattern of coming downwards and learning how to deal with that, and then rising upwards. Super simple. Grab a bell, get set up in your lateral stance, and if you are unfamiliar with all of this, jump into my Art of Kettlebell Juggling Foundations course, and I go through all of the technique for mills in that course, and so you can come back and understand these drills more. So I'm in my lateral stance, ready for my lateral mill. And what I'm gonna do is two different drills. The first one's gonna be working on that compressive force. So dealing with the momentum of the bell coming down, and then we're just gonna end in a rack position. Okay? Usually we're breathing in as we let go, and because the catch is the most intense part, where I need to be the tightest, I'm breathing out to create that tension. In, out. And you see how I'm keeping my structure. I'm allowing myself to rotate, because naturally the body wants to. And I'm staying strong. The next drill is going to be the opposite. So I'm going to work on accelerating out of that bottom stage upwards into an overhead. Okay? So I'm going to start from a rack position. Again, inhale as I cast out. Inhale as I come up. Down. down. So there's going to be a bit of a rolling effect where I cast, feel that weight, and then all of a sudden it's time to accelerate. One thing that's really important to keep in mind of this drill is that rotation. And the reason why I love this drill so much is that it forces you to rotate as well. So as I'm coming down, it's really awkward just to keep my chest forward and rack. Naturally, your body's going to want to follow, so I'm going to unstick my back leg, come into a rack position. When I'm going overhead in particular, again, I want to make sure that I'm lining up my hand and my elbow's ability to fold and release back this way to keep it lateral. And by going into that overhead snatch, it forces you to make sure you have that rotation down, because it gets really awkward if you don't. If you try and go overhead and you're not rotated in, it's really awkward. Whereas this, snatching from this position here, is the exact same as snatching from in front of the body. So those two drills, killers. They're going to help you build your capacity for all classical juggling movements, because they take care of the two forces that are the things to manage as you learn and go through classical juggling. That is it for this video. If you would like to learn more, purchase my course, Juggling Foundations. It has everything you need to start your juggling journey. I throw in a mix of learning your freestyle movements and your classical juggling essentials. And so there's two different types of kettlebell juggling. Primarily freestyle, usually a lighter weight, more creative, closer to the body, usually keeping flips below 2 rotations, usually even just 1. And there's not as much pivoting, and there's less mill-like movements where we're throwing above the head. Classical juggling is a sport, an established sport, and it's all about mills. I am connecting as many mill-like movements as possible with my 5 basic rotations and the reverses of those rotations, and I am connecting via pivoting all of these elements together. It's all mills, it's all overhead. As soon as a circular fashion of the trajectory ends, your set ends, and there's a program that you build to perform. And that program has to have 30 unique elements, so you can't repeat any one element, which is the fun part about it once you get the hang of it. If you want an even deeper dive, send me a message over Instagram or Somble, and we can talk about 1v1 coaching. This is the deepest dive I know of available for jumping into and learning the nuances of kettlebell juggling with a live coach, and a coach who has a lot of experience with world games, as well as 6 years of practicing and exploring, and most importantly, coaching experience over the last 5 years, teaching a varied population of individuals, from younger to older to athletic to not athletic, etc., etc. So reach out to me, sign up for the course. I'm here if you have any questions. I hope you enjoyed today's little free educational video looking at some of the nuances of understanding juggling and the forces that are involved, and to that degree, the capacity your body needs to stay safe and move efficiently.